Dr. Collins stood in the delivery room, his gloved hands steady as he monitored the final stages of the woman's labor. Her name was Sarah, a young first-time mother, and everything seemed to be going smoothly. Her breathing was deep and controlled as the contractions came faster. But Dr. Collins wasn't focused on Sarah's face. No, his attention was fixed on the placenta. He had done this many times before, and each time, his heart raced with excitement. The moment the baby was born and the placenta followed, that's when the deal was done. The real work began. As the baby let out its first cry, Dr. Collins expertly cut the umbilical cord, then quickly moved the placenta aside. He did it without any hesitation, hiding his intentions behind his calm and professional demeanor. Sarah, exhausted and in awe of her newborn, didn't even notice. She was too busy soaking in the joy of motherhood, too lost in the overwhelming flood of emotions. The nurse stepped forward to congratulate her, her back to Dr. Collins as he did what he had done countless times before. In the chaos of the moment, no one paid attention to the small vial he tucked into his pocket, the one he had been using for years to extract a specific fluid from the placenta. This fluid was of great value to certain people who believed it had the power to heal, to bring strength, or even to help with dark rituals. And Dr. Collins had made a lot of money from it. Once the delivery was over, the mother and baby were taken to another room. Dr. Collins made sure to stay behind, quickly disposing of the placenta in a hidden container. But this wasn't the end of his work. He made a call, as he always did, to a contact who had been his regular buyer for months. "Everything went as planned," Dr. Collins said quietly, his voice smooth and cold. "Meet me tomorrow night, and I'll have the goods." The buyer on the other end of the line chuckled. "You always come through, doctor. We'll be there." Dr. Collins hung up and wiped his hands clean, a look of satisfaction on his face. To most people, he was a respected doctor. But in the shadows, he was something far darker, a man who sold human life for profit. And no one suspected a thing. As the days went by, Dr. Collins continued his routine, always moving between the light of his medical practice and the darkness of his secret dealings. Every week, he would find new ways to harvest parts of the placenta, or sometimes even a few other special items from the body, making sure no one ever suspected him. His clients were willing to pay a high price for the things he gave them. He had made it an art, an untraceable, hidden art that allowed him to live a life of luxury. Expensive cars, a beautiful house, and fine clothes. It was all possible because of the dark trade he had found. But his success came at a price. Dr. Collins had begun to feel a strange sense of unease, something gnawing at him deep inside. He had been doing this for years, yet the guilt never seemed to fade. Sometimes, in the quiet of the night, he would hear a baby's cry in his mind. The sound felt like a warning, but he ignored it. The money, the power, it was too much to walk away from. One day, as he finished yet another procedure, something went wrong. The woman, a young mother named Ella, began to bleed heavily after the delivery. Dr. Collins had to act quickly, but his mind wasn't fully focused. The placenta had come out easily, but there was a problem with the way it was removed. He'd made a small cut, just to get what he needed. But this time, it caused more damage than he expected. The bleeding wouldn't stop. Panic set in as Ella's condition worsened. Dr. Collins rushed to stop the hemorrhaging, but nothing seemed to work. The nurses scrambled around, trying to help, but it was clear Ella was in serious trouble. Ella's eyes fluttered open, and she looked at Dr. Collins with a fearful gaze. "What's happening?" she gasped, her voice weak. Dr. Collins tried to reassure her, but the words wouldn't come out. His hands were trembling, and for the first time in his career, he felt like he had lost control. He was a doctor, after all, supposed to save lives. But here he was, standing over a woman he had just harmed. "Please," Ella whispered again, her breath shallow. "Help me." And in that moment, it hit Dr. Collins like a punch to the gut. He had taken so many lives in exchange for money, so many souls. But here, now, in front of him, was a woman who needed him. A woman whose life he might have already destroyed. He rushed to try and save her, but it was too late. Ella's heart stopped beating. As the doctors and nurses tried to revive her, Dr. Collins backed away, his breath shallow, his heart racing. He had never seen someone die like this, not because of a mistake, not because of a complication. This was his fault. Later, the hospital staff was in an uproar, trying to piece together what had happened. Dr. Collins managed to cover his tracks, as he always did. But as he left the hospital that evening, a cold dread settled in the pit of his stomach. He could no longer escape what he had done. His past was coming for him, and no amount of money or power could shield him from the consequences. The next night, when the buyer came to meet him, Dr. Collins was already preparing to make one final transaction. But as he handed over the goods, the buyer's cold smile was different this time. There was something off about it, something unsettling. "You've been very useful to us, doctor," the buyer said. "But it seems your time has run out." Before Dr. Collins could react, the world went black. The next morning, the police arrived at his office, finding the doctor's body in his private study, an empty syringe beside him. No one knew what had truly happened. Some whispered that Dr. Collins had finally taken his own life, consumed by the guilt of his twisted actions. But those who knew the truth, the people who had been getting their dark rituals from him, knew better. They knew that sometimes, the darkness that you deal with has a way of finding you, no matter how carefully you hide it. And Dr. Collins? He learned, too late, that the things we sell in the shadows always come back to claim us in the light.